What's up, sports fans? This is the Lucas Ross Sports Channel. We continue with our 2025 predictions for the upcoming 2025 college football season. Up next is the North Carolina Tar Heels. North Carolina coming off quite a bit of a disappointing year last year, in my opinion, going 6-7 overall in 2024. Mack Brown obviously fired at the end of the year, stepping down as the head coach, in my opinion. So yeah, the Mack Brown era is now over at North Carolina after so many, not decades, but, after pretty much a long tenure down there at North Carolina. You look at this team for 2025, obviously Bill Belichick era begins for North Carolina this upcoming season. And you look at this team's roster, it's really not, they have a lot of playmakers coming in, from the transfer portal, but they don't really have a ton of depth. I mean, that's kind of what I am concerned about this North Carolina team, is really the depth of this overall roster. They just don't have a lot of backups, and you really only got a couple of options at quarterback. The running back room, I think, is going to be pretty solid. Wide receivers, they've added, some additions in the transfer portal. I think it's going to really take some time for North Carolina to kind of, be that talented team. Now, their schedule, though, gives them a chance to probably have a pretty good year in Bill Belichick's first year. And again, here's a schedule for them in 2025. It's a pretty easy schedule. The non-conference is pretty tough when you got a couple of Big 12 teams in there, but still, North Carolina, though, they were 6-7 last year in 2024. So let's go game by game, and I'll give you my official prediction for this North Carolina team in 2025. And of course, the first game of the year is a pretty big one. They'll play Labor Day on Monday night against TCU. This will be a home game here for the Tar Heels, so the crowd really should be fired up for this game. It's the first game under Bill Belichick, but TCU is a pretty solid program in the Big 12, and they're a pretty consistent program as well. TCU is a well-coached team, and this does kind of remind me, back then a couple of years ago when Deion Sanders came first to Colorado. TCU got beat by that Colorado team. Could North Carolina probably do the same thing what Deion Sanders and that Colorado team did back then? Well, if you watch my TCU video back then, I did pick the Tar Heels to win this game. It's really not just about the overall rosters. TCU, I think, definitely has the better roster, but still, playing at home, this is a pretty tough game to call. I've kind of been back and forth on it. I really thought about choosing TCU, but I'm actually going to go with North Carolina here to win this game. Again, I think it will be a competitive game. It's really probably a game that can go either way, but I wouldn't be surprised if TCU did win this game. But on Labor Day night, I think North Carolina does make a name for itself a little bit. I don't want to go too far with them with the hype and everything, but still, I think the Tar Heels actually get the Bill Belichick era off to a pretty good start. They do win this game and start off 1-0 with a win over TCU on Labor Day night, September the 1st. So yeah, that's the Labor Day Monday night game this year. And then I got them beating Charlotte here on the road September 6th. And yeah, that Charlotte game, they don't really get a lot of time to recover after that TCU game because they have to play, a few days later against Charlotte. And this one is on the road. I mean, I don't understand why it's on the road, but still, North Carolina definitely should be the better team. They should be able to take care of business in that game. And then you got Richmond here. I think they win that one fairly easily. That's an FCS team, so I got this team starting off 3-0. But then after that, they play another Power 4 opponent in UCF. This will be a road game here for the Tar Heels on September 20th. UCF, kind of a similar team to North Carolina. A lot of new faces on the roster that are going to have to really step up big time. And then you got Scott Frost returning here for this program. Yeah, UCF is a team that definitely has a lot of question marks. I don't know if they can probably have a good first year under Scott Frost after a pretty disappointing year last year. I think it's going to take some time, but this is a road game, and still you have questions about North Carolina. I mean, they get off to probably a 3-0 start here. But I think this is how it's going to work. I think they probably split between these two Big 12 non-conference games. They probably beat TCU, but then they lose to UCF. And plus, this one is on the road, so that's not a really tough place to play, but I think UCF will come in a little bit fired up, especially if the Tar Heels are coming in a little bit undefeated. So I think this is a close game, but I'm actually going to go with UCF here. I think North Carolina probably has the better playmakers on their roster more than UCF does, but Again, I think they split between these two Big 12 non-conference games. They beat TCU, but they lose to UCF. But I can see it being the opposite. You can definitely change that around. They can probably beat UCF, but lose to TCU. That's just how I see it, going here for the Tar Heels. But I got them losing to UCF, and that's going to drop them now their first loss of the season. That's going to put them at 3-1. And then they get their first bye week. Actually had a pretty good time. They play a big game against Clemson at home on October 4th. To be honest, though, I don't really see this one being all that close. North Carolina is going to come in definitely fired up for this one, but Clemson is going to be a very experienced team. You got Cade Klubnik coming back at quarterback with a really explosive offense. Defensively, they're going to be pretty strong there with Tom Allen taking over defensive coordinator. So, yeah, Clemson's going to be a pretty dangerous team in my opinion. I think North Carolina maybe can keep it close, maybe for a quarter or even the first half, but still, I do expect Clemson to win this one pretty big. I think Clemson does beat North Carolina here. They give North Carolina their second loss of the year. So that's going to put North Carolina now at 3-2. And then they play on the road at California on October 18th. Cal is a team that, definitely has a lot of question marks. I don't think they're going to be a bad team, though. They could be just a pretty average team and then also a solid team. And this one is also at West. And how many times did we see that last year, that a team does travel at West? It does tend to give some teams some trouble. So, yeah, the travel definitely could cause a little bit of, a trouble here for the Tar Heels. And, yeah, I think Cal will definitely probably run the football in this game and try to waste the clock down. And I think that's going to work. I think the Golden Bears of California do get the win here over North Carolina. Again, the travel and everything is going to come in, to play for this one. And I think the Tar Heels do drop this one as well. So that's 3 losses in a row after a 3-0 start there from that stretch, September 20th to October 18th. But then they kind of get a break here in the next 4 games from the stretch of October 25th to November 15th. They'll play Virginia at home here on October 25th. A Virginia team that I'm not really that high on this year. This is a program that's not been really trending in the right direction as of late. And now, in the past, in the Mac Brown era, Virginia really gave a lot of problems to North Carolina. And Virginia actually beat North Carolina one time, maybe even twice if I can't remember correctly. But yeah, this Virginia team, maybe they'll come out competitive in this one, especially after, traveling out west from last week. Maybe North Carolina comes in a little bit sloppy. I think North Carolina does pull away at the end, and I think they'll get the win here by at least like 10 to 13 points. So I'm going to say that North Carolina does win it in that range, and that's going to put them now at 4-3. And then they play on the road at Syracuse on October 31st on that Friday, Halloween. Syracuse is a team that kind of is similar to North Carolina. They don't really have a ton of depth on their roster, but they're not really quite as talented as North Carolina is, in my opinion, just from a standpoint and roster-wise. And Syracuse is a team that I'm kind of taking, a little bit of a step back this year. They lost, some good playmakers from last year's team, including quarterback Kyle McCord. So, yeah, this Syracuse team, I think, is going to pretty much struggle this year, in my opinion. And they could really take a big step back with also a pretty tough schedule. So, yeah, I think North Carolina does win in a pretty competitive game. This one is on a Friday, and I do expect it to be pretty close here for a weeknight game. And I think North Carolina, though, does get the win. So that's going to put them at 5-3. Then they get their second bye week before playing at home against Stanford on November 8th. This one should be a pretty easy win here for the Tar Heels. Stanford is a team that has, a new coaching staff, obviously, and a team that's just not going to have a lot of talent. And they're really not the same program as they used to be. This might be the worst team in the ACC this year, in my opinion, or maybe like the second to worst team. But I think North Carolina does get the win. The bye week does help them out, and I think they beat Stanford here fairly easily. That's going to put them now at 6-3. Then they play at Wake Forest, road game here on November 15th. Another game, where North Carolina definitely probably wins pretty easily, but it is on the road, so maybe the Tar Heels do start off slow in this game. But I look at Wake Forest, just not really a lot of talent like they used to have on their roster, and they haven't been really good in the last couple of years. So yeah, the Demon Deacons are a team that I'm not really high on, and I think North Carolina goes on the road and beats Wake Forest here on November 15th. And then you look at these final 2 games for the Tar Heels as they sit here at 7-3. They got a couple of rivalry games, Duke and NC State. You got one of them at home and then obviously the other one on the road. These are probably the two biggest games here on this schedule for North Carolina, maybe beside the Clemson game and then also the non-conference games against the Big 12 teams. But you look at Duke here, this is a team that is going to really, this is going to be a pretty good team in my opinion. They could be like a top 25 team. Defensively, they're going to be pretty good on that side of the football with Manny Diaz's defensive background. But offensively, can they develop something in the run game and then also in the passing game? They do have the transfer quarterback coming in from Tulane, which I think he'll provide a spark for this Duke team. But North Carolina is playing at home. They definitely should be able to come in fired up for this one because of the rivalry. And yeah, this rivalry could really be intense with Bill Belichick coming in. That goes for the same thing with the NC State rivalry. I think this is a close game, but I did my Duke video a long time ago, and I did pick North Carolina to win this game. So if there is one game on the schedule where North Carolina can pull off an absolute big win, it is this game. So I think North Carolina does beat Duke here. Duke might be in the top 25 by this point. You never know. So I think the Tar Heels do get the win, and that's going to put them now at 8-3. So 5 wins in a row going into the final game of the season, and that's on the road against rival NC State on November 29th. You look at this rivalry as of late, NC State has been the better team, and they kind of been the more physical team, in my opinion, and definitely the more, talented team, per se. NC State's going to be a pretty solid team. They should be right there around a 6, 7, 8 win team, somewhere in that particular win range. And this is a team that's going to have a pretty solid roster, and I think they'll be a lot better compared to last year. NC State's really dominated this rivalry as of late. Can they make it 4 years in a row? I think it's been 3 years since they beat them 3 years in a row. Or actually, I think it's been 4 years if I'm not wrong. 3 or 4 years. Can they make it 4 or 5 years in a row here in this rivalry? I think they do. I think NC State, again, the physicality of this team is just really off the charts, and it just seems like they get the better of North Carolina as of late. So yeah, I think NC State does prevail in this one. I'm expecting a competitive game, but I think it's going to be the Wolfpack that does win this one. I'm going to say it's going to be probably 4 or 5 years in a row that they win this rivalry. So yeah, North Carolina does come up short after winning 5 games in a row, and I think they also probably split those 2 rival games. They beat Duke but lose to NC State there in those 2 rivalry games. So I got the Tar Heels finishing 8-4 in 2025. Again, this is a pretty favorable schedule for the Tar Heels. That's why the prediction is kind of so high for this team. If they had a few tougher opponents like Louisville, probably Miami, and then also maybe Florida State, they probably would have been sitting at 6-6, because I can definitely see this team going 6-6, 7-5, or possibly 8-4. That's probably the most likely records for this team. I do expect them to make it to a bowl game in Bill Belichick's first year. It would definitely kind of be a big shock if they were not to make it to a bowl game, but still, I don't want to go too far with this team just yet and call them a dark horse team, but based on how easy this schedule is, that's why the prediction came out to be 8-4. So that's my prediction for the North Carolina Tar Heels for 2025. Do you guys agree or disagree with this prediction? And give me your prediction for the Tar Heels down in the comments below. Thank you for watching this video, and stay tuned for more sports content videos on my Lucas Ross Sports YouTube channel.